My wife cheated on me on a train while we were traveling to see our friends. I used to think trains were romantic, the kind of place where you watch small towns slide by and you hold hands like you are in a movie. Then I married Kendra and learned that romance is just a word people use right before reality shows up with a clipboard and a smirk. We were headed from Illinois to Missouri for a birthday party weekend with our friend group. Nothing fancy, just a rented house outside St. Louis. Board games, chili that someone would claim was secret recipe, and at least one person crying in a bathroom because they lost at charades. The usual. Kendra loved the idea of the train. She said it felt grown up, like we were choosing adventure over traffic. I said sure, because I was trying to be that husband, supportive, easygoing, not the guy who complains about legroom and snack prices like he is doing investigative journalism. The night before we left, she packed like we were moving. 3 outfits for one night. 2 pairs of shoes that looked identical to me, and a little makeup bag that could have doubled as carry-on luggage. I made a joke about it, and she smiled without looking up. A quick smile, like she had scheduled it. The morning of the trip, I double-checked our tickets on my phone. Seats together, car 3, table side. I felt proud of myself. Small husband points. Kendra kissed my cheek and said I was the best. And if you have ever been called the best while your spouse is already reaching for their phone, you know that compliment has the shelf life of a banana. At Union Station, the air smelled like coffee and metal, and everyone moved like they were late, even when they were early. We found our platform, and our friends started arriving in little bursts of energy, loud greetings, selfie angles, and the kind of laughter that makes strangers glance over like they want to be included. There was Mason, who treated every trip like a business retreat, even when it was a party. There was Trina, who could turn any conversation into a debate and somehow make it fun. And there was Elise and Jordan, the couple who never fought in public, but always looked like they had just finished fighting in private. Then came Caleb. Caleb was not part of the core group. He was a +1, or a friend of a friend. One of those people who slides into a circle like he has always been there. He wore a neat jacket and carried a small bag like he was doing a weekend mission. And he looked at Kendra like he recognized her from somewhere he could not admit. Out loud, Kendra said, "Oh hey," with a little spark in her voice that I had not heard that morning when I asked if she wanted breakfast. I noticed it. I filed it away. I told myself not to be weird, because I am not insecure, I am observant. There is a difference. Insecure is when you panic without evidence. Observant is when you calmly collect the evidence like you are building a case for a jury that does not know it is coming yet. We boarded car 3. The seats were exactly what the pictures promised, slightly too narrow and definitely designed by someone who hates knees. But we had a table, and the table made it feel like we were a team, like we were on the same side of life. Kendra sat by the window. I sat across from her. Our friends were around us. The mood was light. Phones out, snacks passed around. Mason talking about how Missouri taxes were weird for some reason. Trina arguing that chili should never have cinnamon. Jordan pretending he was not listening while clearly storing every word for later. Caleb ended up 2 rows behind us on the aisle, close enough that I could see him in my peripheral vision, close enough that Kendra could see him if she turned her head even slightly, and she did more than once. The train pulled out with that gentle jolt, the city turning into warehouses, then into flat winter fields, and for the first 30 minutes, I let myself relax. I thought, this is nice, this is normal, maybe I have been working too much, maybe Kendra, and I just needed a weekend with friends. Then Kendra got a text. Her phone lit up on the table just for a second, and I saw the name at the top, Caleb, and I saw the first line, "You still okay with the plan?" Kendra flipped the phone over like it had bitten her. I smiled and said, "Everything good?" She said, "Yep, just Trina being dramatic again." Which was funny because Trina was not texting her. Trina was right there arguing about cinnamon like her life depended on it. I kept my face calm. I nodded. I even laughed at a joke Mason told. I have always been good at acting normal when something is not normal. My mom used to call it my customer service face, the face you wear when you want to keep the peace while you figure out what is actually happening. A little later, Kendra said she needed the restroom. She stood up quickly, too quickly, and without looking at me, she said, "I will be right back." I watched her walk down the aisle, and I watched Caleb stand up almost at the same time like a dancer hitting a mark. He did not follow directly. He waited, counted a few seconds, then moved. And that is the moment my whole body went cold. Not because I knew everything, but because I knew enough, because when 2 people move like that, it is not an accident, it is choreography. I did not jump up, I did not cause a scene, I did not do the movie husband thing where he storms down the aisle and demands answers. I stayed seated, and I told myself something simple. Okay, we are gathering facts, we are not reacting to fear, we are reacting to truth. I pulled out my phone, opened the ticket app, and checked something I had not thought about earlier. Our seat assignments and the layout of the train. Car 3 had 2 restrooms, one near the front, one near the back. and there was a narrow space between cars where the doors closed, and the noise got louder, a little pocket of privacy that people used for phone calls and whispers and secrets. I looked up, and I saw Jordan watching me, not smiling, not joking, just watching like he was reading my face. He leaned forward and said quietly, "You saw it too, right?" I held my customer service face for one more second, then I let it fade. I said, "Yeah, I saw something." Jordan nodded once slow, like he had already decided what kind of day this was going to become. And right then my phone vibrated again, another message, not from Kendra, not from Caleb, from an unknown number. It said, "Do not confront her on the train, not yet." My stomach dropped, because now it was not just a suspicion, now it was a warning, and warnings do not come out of nowhere. I stared at the screen, and I realized someone on this train knew a lot more than I did. And I was about to find out why they wanted me calm, and why they knew my wife was about to do something she could never take back. I did not answer the message right away. I locked my phone and rested my hands on the table like I was about to pray or flip it over. Either felt possible. The train hummed louder now, like it was aware it had become a container for secrets. Mason was mid-story about a client who emailed at midnight. Trina rolled her eyes. Elise smiled too hard. And Jordan kept watching me like a smoke alarm that had already smelled fire. Minutes passed. Not the casual kind. The heavy kind. The kind that stack on your chest. Kendra did not come back. Caleb did not come back. And no one said anything, because no one wanted to be the person who named the thing before it fully existed. I checked the time on my watch, even though the phone was right there, 7 minutes. Then 8. Trains have a way of stretching time, especially when you are counting it. I stood up slowly and said I was going to grab a coffee. My voice sounded normal, which impressed me. Jordan stood up too and said he would come. Smooth, casual, like this was planned. We walked down the aisle together, past strangers who were reading and sleeping and living in blissful ignorance. The coffee station was empty except for a bored attendant who looked like he had seen every human emotion and was unmoved by all of them. Jordan leaned in and spoke low. They went toward the back. I nodded. I did not ask how he knew. Sometimes people know things because they have been paying attention longer than you have. We did not rush. Rushing makes noise, and noise draws attention. We moved like men who were just stretching their legs. When we reached the space between cars, I heard voices. Not words at first, just tone. That familiar mix of excitement and caution. Then I heard Kendra laugh. Not her polite laugh. Her real one. The one she used when she forgot to manage herself. My first instinct was anger, sharp and immediate. But it was followed by something colder, clarity. Anger wants action. Clarity wants control. I stepped closer but stayed hidden. The doors were half closed. Enough of a gap to see shadows. I did not look right away. I listened. Caleb said, "This is crazy." Kendra said, "I know." There was a pause. The kind that means more is being said without sound. Then Kendra said, "He is right there, you know." Caleb said, "You said you wanted this weekend." Kendra said, "I wanted to feel chosen." That sentence landed harder than any confession could have. Not because it surprised me, but because it was lazy. It blamed the world for a decision she was actively making. I leaned back. I did not need more. I did not want images. I wanted leverage. I checked my phone again and typed a reply to the unknown number. "Who is this?" The response came fast. "Someone who does not want a scene. Someone who wants you to get home with your dignity." I asked how they knew. They said, "Because this is not the first time." That part stung. But it also focused me. Patterns matter. First times can be mistakes. Patterns are choices. I asked what they wanted. They said, "Nothing from you. Just patience. Let the weekend happen. Let her think she is winning. Then decide what you want when the noise is gone." I exhaled slowly. Jordan looked at me and raised an eyebrow. I said quietly, "We go back." He hesitated, then nodded. Back at the table, I sat down. Mason asked if the coffee was terrible. I said unforgettable, which made Trina laugh. Kendra returned a few minutes later alone, her hair slightly off, her smile over-rehearsed. She said sorry the line was long. I said no problem, and meant something different than she thought. She sat down and reached for my hand. I let her, not because I wanted comfort, but because I wanted information. Her hand was warm, her grip too firm, like she was checking if I was still there. Caleb returned later and avoided my eyes. The train rolled on through towns that blurred together, and I realized something important. Whatever this weekend was going to be, it was no longer about catching her. It was about choosing myself, and that thought settled in me like a plan finally clicking into place. Calm, steady, inevitable. We arrived in Missouri under a sky that could not decide what mood it was in, gray but bright, like it was holding something back. The station smelled different, warmer somehow, and everyone stretched like they had survived something together, luggage thumping onto the platform. Voices getting louder now that the train could no longer hear us. Kendra acted normal, which is to say she acted like someone performing normal, She laughed at the right moments, took photos, leaned into me when others were watching. I noticed everything and reacted to nothing. Because reacting early is how you lose control. The rental house was bigger than the photos, which is always a red flag. Too many rooms, too many doors, too many places for conversations to splinter. Mason claimed a room near the kitchen. Trina took the one with the balcony. Elise and Jordan disappeared upstairs without a word. Caleb lingered in the hallway like he was waiting for permission from someone who was not me. Kendra suggested we take the room at the end of the hall, the quiet one. I agreed because I wanted space, and because quiet rooms hear things better. The first night was exactly what it was supposed to be: chilly, drinks, jokes that got funnier the louder they were repeated. I played my role well. I smiled. I told a story about work. I laughed at Trina's exaggerated impressions. I even helped Mason with a board game rule dispute like nothing in. My life had shifted off its axis. Kendra watched me closely, her eyes searching my face like she was checking for cracks. When she found none, she relaxed, which told me more than she ever could have with words. At some point, Caleb and Kendra ended up on opposite sides of the room, pretending not to notice each other, which is what people do when they are very aware of someone. I noticed Jordan watching them too, his expression unreadable. Later, when people drifted to bed and the house quieted into that late-night creaking silence, Jordan found me in the kitchen. He poured water and said, "You okay?" I said, "Define okay." He nodded and said, "You want to talk?" I said, "Not yet," because I was still deciding what talking would cost me. In our room, Kendra brushed her teeth and talked about plans for tomorrow like nothing had happened. Hiking maybe, brunch definitely. She said it was nice to get away. I said it was. And it was true in a way she could not imagine. She fell asleep quickly. I did not. I lay there listening to the house breathe, to doors opening and closing softly, to footsteps that paused outside our room and moved on. Sometime after midnight, my phone buzzed again. The same unknown number. They said he is in the guest room across from the stairs. I stared at the ceiling, then typed back, "Why are you helping me?" The reply came slower this time. "Because I was once you." That was not enough information, but it was enough truth. I turned my phone off and made a decision, not a dramatic one, not a revenge fantasy, a clean decision. I would let the weekend play out. I would watch, I would listen, and when it was time, I would speak once, clearly, and then I would walk away with my dignity intact. Morning came too fast, sunlight cutting through the blinds like it had somewhere important to be. Kendra woke up cheerful, kissed my shoulder, asked if I slept well. I said like a baby, which was not a lie. Babies wake up a lot. Over breakfast, Caleb sat across from me and talked about nothing: weather, sports, the kind of topics people use as shields. I listened and nodded and realized something almost funny. The man was not special, he was just available. And that made everything simpler, because you do not compete with availability. You step aside and let it collapse under its own weight. The day stretched ahead of us, full of plans and possibilities. And I knew somewhere between brunch and nightfall the truth would surface on its own. It always does. Especially when people think they are getting away with something. The hike was Mason's idea, which meant it was less of a hike and more of a scenic walk with strong opinions. The trail wound through bare trees and patches of sunlight, everyone talking in clusters that shifted every few minutes. Kendra stayed close to me at first, her hand brushing mine like muscle memory. Then gradually, she drifted ahead with Trina, laughing too loudly at something that was not that funny. Caleb walked behind us, always behind, like he was trying not to exist while also needing to be noticed. I let the distance grow because distance reveals intentions. At a lookout point, everyone stopped to take pictures. Phones up, backs turned, and Jordan stepped beside me. He said quietly, "You are handling this better than most." I said, "I am not handling it yet. I am observing it." He nodded like that made perfect sense, because it did. Observation is what you do before you choose the least damaging truth. Back at the house, the afternoon scattered us again. Naps, showers, quiet corners, the kind of downtime where people make decisions they later pretend just happened. I sat on the back steps with a drink I did not finish and listened to laughter drift through open windows. And that is when Elise sat down next to me. She did not ask how I was. She said, "I think you should know something." I said, "Go on." She told me she had seen Kendra and Caleb texting weeks ago. Nothing explicit, just familiar, too familiar. She said she had convinced herself it was harmless. She apologized without drama, just stated facts, and I thanked her because honesty delivered calmly is still honesty. Evenings have a way of compressing things. Dinner came, jokes came back, but the tension had changed shape, sharper now, more visible. Kendra drank more than usual. Caleb drank less, which is how you can tell who feels safe and who feels exposed. After dinner, Mason suggested cards. Trina cheered, and somehow I ended up sitting across from Caleb at the table. The cards gave us something to look at besides each other. He avoided my eyes, fumbled his turns, and at one point whispered sorry under his breath like it was a reflex. I did not respond. Apologies without action are just noise. Later that night, Kendra pulled me aside in the hallway. She said, "You seem distant." Her voice practiced soft. I said, "I have been thinking." She smiled nervously and said, "About what?" I said, "About how people change when they think no one is watching." Her smile froze, just for a second. Then she laughed and said, "You are being philosophical." I said, "Maybe." Then I added, "We should talk tomorrow." Her eyes widened slightly. "Tomorrow when?" I said, "When we get back." On the train, where things started, she searched my face for anger and did not find it, which unsettled her more than anger ever could. She nodded and said okay, and walked away without touching me. That night I slept better, not because things were resolved, but because they were finally named, even if only between us. And names have power. Morning came with packing and fake cheer. Hugs, plans to do this again soon that everyone knew were lies. As we loaded the car to head back to the station, the unknown number texted one last time. "You are doing the right thing." I deleted the message without replying. I did not need confirmation anymore. I needed closure. The train ride home felt different, quieter. The landscape familiar now, less romantic, more honest. Kendra sat across from me again, hands folded, phone untouched. Halfway through the ride, she took a breath and said, "I know you know." I nodded. She started to explain. I raised a hand gently and said, "Save it. Explanations are for people trying to fix things. I am here to finish them." She looked like she wanted to argue. Then she looked tired, and in that moment I saw her clearly, not as my wife, not as my failure, just as someone who made a choice and now had to live with it. And for the first time all weekend, I felt completely steady. Because whatever came next, it was mine to choose. She stared at me for a long moment like she was waiting for permission to continue. Then she started talking anyway because silence makes people panic. She said it was not planned. She said it just happened. She said she felt invisible lately. She said Caleb listened. She said it did not mean anything. She said a lot of things people say when they are trying to turn a decision into weather, something that arrived without consent. I let her talk because interruption would have turned it into a debate, and I was not there to debate reality. When she finished, she looked at me with that hopeful fear people get when they want forgiveness but do not want consequences. I nodded once and said, "Thank you for being honest now." Her shoulders relaxed like she thought honesty was the finish line. I added, "This does not end with yelling or begging. It ends with clarity." She frowned and asked what that meant. I said it meant I am not going to compete with someone you chose while sitting across from me. I am not going to rebuild trust on top of a train schedule and a secret plan. And I am not going to pretend this is something we both did. Her eyes filled, but I did not soften. Not because I lacked empathy, but because empathy does not require self-betrayal. She said, "Are you leaving me?" I said, "I am leaving this version of us." There was a long pause. The train rocked gently like it was reminding us motion does not stop for private drama. She asked if there was anything she could do. I thought about that carefully and said, "Yes, you can let this be clean. No lies to friends. No rewriting history. No turning this into a mystery where I am the villain. Just tell the truth and let people land where they land." She nodded slowly like she was memorizing instructions. When we arrived back in Illinois, our friends hugged us goodbye without knowing it was the last time they would see us together like that. Kendra went to her sister's place. I went home. The house felt bigger immediately, not emptier, just quieter, like it had been waiting for honesty too. Over the next few days, messages came in, some supportive, some confused. None surprising. Mason asked if we were okay. I said define okay and meant it. Trina called and said she was proud of me for not blowing up. Jordan sent a simple text that said you handled it right. The unknown number never messaged again, and I never looked for them. Some people are meant to appear only long enough to keep you steady. Weeks passed. Routine shifted. I slept better, ate better, laughed at things that had nothing to do with coping. One evening, I found the train tickets still in my email, and instead of deleting them, I archived them. Not as a wound, but as a reminder. I had trusted my instincts. I had stayed calm. I had chosen myself without cruelty. And that is when I realized the real twist was not the betrayal. It was the fact that I did not lose myself trying to understand it. I lost a marriage that no longer fit the man I was becoming, and I kept everything that mattered, my dignity, my clarity, and my ability to move forward without dragging anger behind me like luggage. The train had taken us to a party, but it brought me back to myself. And that was a trip worth taking. People think the hardest part is the confrontation, the moment where truth finally steps into the light and everyone freezes. But the real challenge comes after, when there is no script, no audience, and no adrenaline to carry you through. It came in the mornings when I reached for a second mug out of habit. then remembered I only needed one now. It came in the evenings when the house settled into silence that was not sad, just honest. I learned quickly that silence is only frightening when you are avoiding yourself. I was not. Friends adjusted in their own awkward ways. Some tried to stay neutral like this was a weather dispute. Some quietly chose sides without announcing it. And some surprised me by stepping closer. Trina showed up one afternoon with takeout and zero questions. She said, "Eat first, then talk if you want." Mason sent job articles like a man who only knows how. To help through productivity, Jordan and I started grabbing coffee. Not to analyze the past, but to talk about everything else: sports, work, stupid internet videos, life beyond damage control. Kendra and I handled logistics with polite efficiency, paperwork, schedules, decisions stripped of emotion. She tried once to revisit the conversation, to add footnotes and context. I listened and said, "I am not angry, but I am done." And that was the truth in its simplest form. No dramatic flair, no cruelty, just finality. One night, I took a walk near the station where it had all started, not for closure, but because I refused to let places inherit my pain. Trains came and went, strangers laughed. Someone played music softly on a platform bench. Life moved forward with impressive indifference, and I liked that. It reminded me that my story was important to me, not to the universe, and that was freeing. I realized I had not lost faith in people. I had just refined my standards. I trusted myself more now. Trusted the quiet signals, the small moments where something feels off before it explodes into something undeniable. I stopped replaying conversations, stopped rewriting scenes, stopped asking why. Because why is a question that never stops charging interest. Instead, I focused on what I wanted next, what kind of life felt honest, what kind of love would feel calm instead of confusing. I did not rush answers. I did not need to replace anything. I was not empty, I was open. And there is a difference. Somewhere in that openness, I felt something solid return, confidence not rooted in being chosen, but in choosing well. I smiled more easily, slept without tension in my shoulders, laughed without it sounding forced. And I knew the story was not over yet. It was just shifting genres, from suspense to something steadier, something earned, and I was ready to see where it went next. A few months later, I took another train, not out of nostalgia, not to prove anything, just because it was the easiest way to get to a conference 2 states over. I chose a window seat this time. Alone, no table, no shared plans, and I felt oddly light about it. The train moved the same way it always does, steady, indifferent, honest, and I watched the landscape change without attaching meaning to every mile. I realized then how much I had changed, not hardened, not closed off, just clearer. I was no longer scanning for signs, no longer bracing for impact. I trusted myself to handle whatever showed up. During the ride, I thought about that weekend, not with bitterness, but with perspective. Betrayal does not destroy you if you do not let it rewrite who you are. It simply reveals where the cracks already were. And once revealed, you get to decide whether to patch them or walk away from the structure entirely. I had walked away, calmly, deliberately, without burning anything down, and that mattered. I checked my phone and saw a message from Jordan about grabbing a drink later that week. Another from Trina with a terrible joke. Life continuing without needing my approval. I smiled and put the phone away. When the train slowed into the station, I stood up, grabbed my bag, and felt something settle into place. Not closure, something better, alignment. I was exactly where I was supposed to be, not because things had gone right, but because I had responded right. I stepped onto the platform, merged into the crowd, and disappeared into my next chapter without drama, without regret, without looking back. Because the real victory was never about catching anyone in the act. It was about knowing when to get off the train, and I had chosen the right stop.